have no petitions. We do have a public input in relation to Pest Free Kaipātiki Restoration Society, and I'll just double check if Joe Knight is online yet, please.
Yes,
There, Joe.
Mario. Hello, how are you?
Good, good. So obviously we have item number 13, I think it is, on the agenda, which is the transfer of the old Glenfield Bowling Club to Pest Free Kaipātiki Restoration Society, and we look forward to your presentation, and then after that also welcome John Gillon, Chair of Kaipātiki Local Board, online. So when we get to that item, I'll ask John to speak as well. But Joe, the floor is yours. Usually it's up to 5 minutes, and if there are any questions, I think we've all read the paper, and I'm expecting that there'll be good support for the recommendations in the paper. Joe, I'll pass it to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, councillors, officers. Thank you very much for this time where we can actually talk to you. I wanted to do three things this morning. I wanted to very briefly tell you what we do at Pest Free Kaipātiki Restoration Society, tell you about the social impacts that come from that, and the importance to mental health. So we're a young organisation. We are very keen to retain the forest cover we have, and in fact increase it if we can, particularly in our reserve areas. And we also are keen to keep the social impact and the mental health of the organisation, of the area, up to scratch. There is good documentary evidence now that having green areas are very important for mental health. So to move right along. Next slide, please. You can see that in Kaipātiki area on the North Shore, we've got a lot of reserves being looked after by volunteers, 28 of them, many of them with active weed control. We as Pest Free Kaipātiki Restoration Society overview or umbrella a lot of groups. We supply them with materials, information, and we also have a free area where we loan tools and materials to the residents that are helping us, setting up the ecological halos, which we use to surround bush areas or areas of ecological significance, and keep rats, possums and stoats in control in those areas. Next slide, please. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, here we go. And in addition, we have a number of really important but specific programs. The Greening of Kaipātiki is to provide extra nesting areas for some of the birds that are missing out on the big old trees that give them the hollows. So it's called Hollows for Homes. But also encourage people to regard their bush and their trees with more respect, so that we get less trees cut down where it's possible, and less trees damaged as well. We do a lot of planting to replace the weeds that we've removed, and we also provide pest plant disposal for the residents so that we can encourage them to get rid of things like moth plant, and we get rid of the seeds into an area where they're not going to get redistributed. We in Kaipātiki are very lucky to have a huge area of kauri. We have got 2 diseased trees, and it is the aim of Pest Free Kaipātiki to keep it that way, and we've got great cooperation from our population. We've had several big surveys and programs going. Buffer Survey Project was in fact something that was a contract with the council, where we actually went around surveying the households around valuable reserves to find out their propensity for getting rid of the plant pests within their area, and we got a really great response. We were very pleased. We're very lucky that we've got a couple of very great swamp areas within Kaipātiki still. Soldiers Bay Diversity area is a fantastic area, worked on by a very active group of volunteers, and highly utilised by the population. Of course, we also have school programs, freshwater programs, support street champions, who are people who support the buffers, and the tool shed. is also important. Hit squads, very interesting group of people who go out usually on Monday mornings, usually big groups of retired people who actually have a very social time, but actually work for about 4 hours in the morning, then have coffee together, often in many of the reserves that we've got here in Kaipātiki, sometimes on private property too. Thank you. Next slide, please. So, okay. Why do we want to gain the Glenfield Bowling Club? Well, it's because we have been crammed into a tiny office at the bottom of Fern Glen, and we're very grateful to Fern Glen for that offer. But we have now grown to the extent that really it's only legal to keep about 1 or 2 people in that office. And these photographs, I'll point out, were taken pre-COVID, and that it's very difficult to work in these circumstances. And so that does actually affect efficiency. We never have everything all in the same place. Next slide, please. This is where we run the tool shed from. This is open every Saturday morning, and in the last fiscal year we loaned out to 900 different inquiries during those Saturday mornings. If we can move to the Glenfield Bowling Club, we can run this every day, because we'll have people in the office every day so that we can loan things out to the residents who are helping us control these areas. And of course, the residents are keen on doing that, because we now, in some areas of Kaipātiki, have got 4 times, this is measured, the number of birds that we had when we started. So every winter we measure the birds and also the levels of rats and possums in the area using chew cards, so that we can actually scientifically say, well, we have actually made a difference. Thank you. Next slide. The Glenfield Bowling Club would be a perfect base. It's got ample room. We only really will redevelop and use the top level. The bottom level will remain basement and for storage. We will be able to run that tool shed, as I said, which services Kaipātiki residents. The key, we feel, to getting people to cooperate is to provide them with information, but also the tools. Removing barriers is one of the ways that we get good cooperation. The bowling green is an area that we're really keen to use. And just recently we've been negotiating to move some totara logs there that have been illegally felled in one of our reserves, so that they can be carved into po. We will reuse the existing water retention system that was put in by the bowling club to water plants and other materials there, and also probably run the toilets actually in the end. We'll use it to secure housing for our trailer, which we use for many events, and it'll give us a good central position in Kaipātiki in the middle of Glenfield, which is an area that needs more help and development, and we've already got exciting plans in the wings ready to do that. Of course, we will be able to hire out parts of it at reasonable rates for other community groups, and that will provide us with a bit of revenue, so we can use that revenue to help run the building, help pay for the bills that come in with the building, and also provide some ongoing maintenance. But the biggest thing is it would maintain our vibrancy, our momentum, and really increase our profile in areas where we haven't moved yet. Thank you.
Jo, we're running a bit short. We've gone over time a little bit, so if you can skip through these remaining slides quite quickly, that'd be great. It's a great presentation, so I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we're pretty strict on our time.
Okay. Righto then. To do this, we've got a fantastic partnership with Naylor Love, so we could skip over a couple here. And we've got a lot of free material being given to us. So leader scaffolding, we've got free project management, free electrical work, free legal advice, free architectural services, all from the community that are around us. So there's huge support for this. And if we can move on now, one more. Please. This is an artist's impression of what it could look like once we've developed that and perhaps had permission to occupy the sides of the reserve, so that we can plant these areas and use it as a burgeoning community reserve area. So I'd like to thank the Kaipātiki Local Board, of course the Auckland Council, and also the Birkenhead Licensing Trust, who have all been a great support to us as we've got ready to launch out on this really exciting business. So we're just dying to get into this building. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joe. That was a great presentation, and I think confirmed for all of us the incredible work that you're doing there. Congratulations on that. I have got one question, first of all, in the name of Councillor Chris Darby.
Thank you, Mayor, and kia ora, Joe. Great presentation. You put a strong case. You put that to the local board as well. I noticed John Gillon's on this call, so he would endorse that. Joe, I just, you know, for us, this building is a bit of a liability, and I go to paragraph 61 of the report, and I just want you to confirm this, that paragraph 61 reads, transferring ownership of the buildings to Pest Free Kaipātiki will also transfer responsibility for all future costs associated with the building to the occupant, Pest Free Kaipātiki. So you concur with that? This won't see council budgets called upon. You've got a really strong group, and you can endure the costs of you know, restoring and getting this wonderful proposal realised. Can you confirm that?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Councillor Darby. When we went in to do the EOI, we were very much helped by Naylor Love, big construction company. They brought on the day of the EOI along their structural engineer and some other experts from the area, and they had a look over the building as well. And in fact, they then took the list of 53 things that needed to be done to the building and sorted them and put a provisional cost on them, and are helping us along the way as well as everybody else. So we've got a large number of firms helping us. So to the best of our ability, we feel that we can solve many of the problems there. We will be applying for and have been applying for funds on outside bodies until we've got ownership of this building. That is difficult.
Thanks, Joe. Second question, Councillor Richard Hills.
Kia ora, Joe, and thanks for all the work you guys are doing. And it's amazing to see how far, you know, Pest Free Kaipātiki has come in the last 6 years, is it now?
Yes.
So my question is, when you and I did a little tour around the buildings and the site, you had, you know, grand plans, and I've seen the plans. Have you scaled back any of that to begin with, just for the first couple of years, to get what you need on the ground so you can continue the work and not switch the focus too much away from the work you're all doing? While you're, yeah.
Yes, we're really conscious of that we can't actually divert staff time onto building time, because we need to continue the impetus that we already have underway. So what we have, with Naylor Love's help, actually got the essential items right up front. So we know that we've got 4 to 5 essential items that must be done before anybody could move into that building, and we will prioritise those. They're the first things that we're going for, and once we've got that, then we will be able to take things at a slower pace. So I don't think we've scaled it down, but we've certainly probably
prioritised.
We've prioritised it very, very strongly.
Perfect, and thanks so much again, Joe. And I'd like to second this. I see Chris has asked to move. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Joe. And I just add my thought there that, I mean, what a fantastic example of a community, local business, private sector and council partnership to achieve what you're setting out to do, and just mobilising the community and doing such good work, and a beautiful area that you'll make even better. So thank you for coming along, and it's been moved by Councillor Chris Darby, seconded by Councillor Richard Hills, to receive your presentation and to thank you for it. And we could also thank you for the good work that you're being done. So I'll put that resolution. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 To the contrary, no. I'll declare that carried unanimously. Thanks, Joe, and thank you for coming along and presenting to us today. Much appreciated. You're very welcome, of course, to stay online to hear the item when we get to it. It's item number 13, I think.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we come now to item number 7, which is local board input. And again, welcome John Gillon as chair of the Kaipātiki Local Board. And it's a hard act to follow, John, but yeah, welcome along and love to hear your thoughts.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Tēnā koutou katoa, everyone. Look, thank you for having me here today, and thank you for allowing Joe Knight to speak as well on behalf of Pest Free Kaipātiki. You've heard an excellent presentation from her, and I'm sure you're all already convinced, but what I'm here to do today is to impart to you the Kaipātiki Local Board is unanimously supportive of the application from PFK to take over the ownership of the Glenfield Bowling Club building and the lease of the underlying land at Ross Reserve in Glenfield. PFK do a fantastic job in our area, coordinating and empowering hundreds of volunteers and neighbours of reserves to look after our parks, catch rats, possums, remove weeds, plant natives, and provide education, stalls at school fairs and other events. And these activities are not only enhancing our public spaces, but bringing communities together. So we're seeing flow-on community development, networking, neighbourhood activities. But as PFK grow, one thing that they are lacking is an adequate home base, gathering space and storage space, as you saw from those photos. When the Glenfield Bowling Club folded and council inherited the building, the local board went through expressions of interest process and ultimately chose PFK as a successful applicant. And we granted them a lease for the land, and we also granted them ownership of the building because we mistakenly believed at the time that we had the authority to do that. Obviously we don't, and which is why I'm here today. It then went out for public consultation where there were no objections from the public or mana whenua. We truly believe that PFK has the ability and resources to fix up the building and turn it into a fantastic facility. We support them having the 2-year lease of the land to get the building up to scratch, or else it will come back to the council and then we can reassess what to do with it. The other option is if you choose not to allow the building to go to PFK, that we can demolish it, but that is at a cost of $150,000, which comes from your budget, not ours. We prefer to give PFK the opportunity to make something of this, and we see it as a win-win for council and PFK. So please consider this carefully, and I hope that you support us in transferring the building to PFK. Thank you.
Thanks, John. That was a really concise account, and what you say makes a whole lot of sense. So shall I get Councillor Hills to move this time and Councillor Darby to second? Oh, sorry, I see on my line Councillor Chris Fletcher wanted to move this one. So Councillor Fletcher to move, Councillor Darby to second, and I'll just open it up for questions, and I have a hand up, but I'm just trying to identify who that might be. Sorry. Oh, Councillor John Watson, thanks. Sorry, where your picture's not up, I just see a hand over the +35. John.
Well, at least it's not a red hand, Mr. Mayor.
Yellow hand, neutral.
First of all, John, I'd like to congratulate your board on the approach you've taken with this. This is an outstanding result. It's very sad always to see a community sports organisation disappear, but if you're going to have a replacement, well, you couldn't do better than Pest Free Kaipātiki. My question, John, just as to the use of the reserve as a whole, and I caught a glimpse of the schematic, the wonderful schematic that Joe put up. Am I right in understanding then that not only will it be the base for Pest Free Kaipātiki, but there'll be potentially a passive or active recreation space for the local community too, somewhere in the environs of the leased land?
So PFK will be leasing the land under the building and also the former bowling green area. So, and I believe their intention is to allow public to gather there and to have events and that sort of thing. In the pictures that you've seen there, PFK, which is what PFK used as part of their application, they also applied for the use of the rest of the reserve. Now, the local board hasn't granted that at this stage. We want to see how they get on with the building and the bowling club, bowling green area first. And in our resolution, we said that we are open to them coming back to us in the future for the other spaces as well. And I think they've got plans for a hedge maze for kids and that kind of thing. But we want them to concentrate on the building for the 2 years get that sorted out, and then they can come back to us if successful.
Okay, thanks, John.
Yep, thank you very much, John and John. Yeah, look, there are no other questions, so has been moved that we receive the report from the Kaipātiki Local Board, and to thank John Gillon for his presentation. So I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 To the contrary, no. I declare that carried. And John, once again, thanks for coming along, and you're welcome to stay for item 13. May take us a little while to get there, but hopefully not too long.
Thank you very much.
Item number 13, which is the item that we had 2 presentations on this morning. And just to acknowledge the message I got that Joe Knight is still on the line. So Joe, this is just so you can hear the proceedings. This is not the area for participation in it, but thank you for being so patient, and thank you for your presentation again this morning. I'm going to, first of all, just get this to be moved and seconded. Maybe Councillor Hills and Councillor Darby would like to move and second that. We have been well briefed on that now, but we have Philippa Carroll, Pip, and Yusuf Khan as our officers here. So Pip, is there anything that you want to mention by way of introduction before we proceed to questions and comments?
Marina, Your Worship and Councillors, thank you for your time. I think Joe Knight and John Gillon covered off most things. We also presented other options to the local board, which didn't really go down that well. One was to divest the land, but 3 of the 4 land parcels at Ross Reserve are Crown owned, demolish the building. And we did get a full building assessment done and detailed costings, but when it came in at over $650,000, that was no longer an option due to constraints in the budget. And also just to acknowledge Joe Knight from Pest Free Kaipātiki, when we went out to an expressions of interest, they submitted a very comprehensive application that came with detailed project plans and costings, which was also to be covered by voluntary professional hours and materials. And as you can see, Kaipātiki Local Board then granted an agreement to lease and lease with the gifting of the building. Staff also support the local board's recommendation to gift the building because under our current guidelines, a tenant-owned building is entitled to a 10 plus 10 year lease as opposed to a 5 plus 5, which is a council-owned building. And we feel that Pest Free Kaipātiki's effort and work to bring the building up to standard is fair that they get a 20-year lease. And as echoed by Joe this morning, it's easy for them to get sponsorship and funding if the building is owned. And from council's viewpoint, it helps us to build relationships that are more reflective of being a partnership with local boards and local communities. And also, just from a purely monetary point of view, this will stop any future liabilities for council, as if we own the building, we are still liable for maintenance and ongoing costs. And also just to note that council definitely support the inclusion of point B, and this just helps clarify the situation, which will also be reflected in the legal documentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pip. And I've, as chair, I've accepted the amendment that has been moved by a councillor on B, which just reinforces your point. Not that there was any expectation, I think, given from the Pest Free Kaipātiki group, but as a precedent for the future, if there's any other transfers, I think it's a good principle to build in. So I've got a number. I'll do questions first, and I've got a number. The first is from Councillor John Watson.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. And this is one that just really arises out of the commentary around point 17 in terms of compensation for improvements to the club, and it's very clear, of course, that there is none. But what I was keen to find out was, going back to 2019, what the status of the Glenfield Bowling Club membership was at that time, and I guess their sense of what it meant, basically giving up this this facility that they'd founded themselves, put a very substantial building on. Was that all quite amicable and a matter of course, or was there any residual kind of attempt or concern that they might keep going? What was the history to that point in 2019?
Hi. The club had wound down to about 10 or 12 members, and the president of the time was very helpful and lovely, and he was there was no animosity. They were really good in helping us get the building ready, as was New Zealand Bowls to sell on. The members dispersed to other bowling clubs. I kind of got to meet them about 2018, and it was all very mutual and amicable, and they were all very helpful. And they just realised that the club had just sort of run its course, and just acknowledged that with all the opening of the new retirement villages, they also have bowling facilities in them. And but no, there was definitely no animosity from our side or theirs that I'm aware of.
Okay.
They were very helpful.
Good, thank you. That's good to hear. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. I just would note that 40 years ago, when I was first elected in Parliament, the bowling clubs and the RSAs were the most important institutes in the community, and both for reasons of ageing population have kind of faded away, which is sad in its own right, but that reflects just a change in what people's interests and preferences are for. But good to hear that was all done amicably. Next question is Councillor Pipacoom.
Oh, thank you. And very, very keen to support this. I just think it's fantastic to see what's come together and the opportunity that's here, and the community getting behind this with the local board. Just really fantastic project. My partai is sort of looking at the bigger picture and is perhaps directed to the chief executive, and whether there's a learning for us in terms of council getting out of the way and tapping into the resources of the community, and whether this is perhaps a template for looking at other projects that might be on the books that have stalled because there isn't the funding or might need to be deferred. And as an example of that partnership, perhaps if there isn't a response now, putting on the spot, but I do feel that this really is an example of what is possible when council does get out of the way, and no doubt the final cost of a big restoration would be a lot more than almost $600,000, but just the opportunity too for sponsorship and co-funding.
Oh yeah, thanks for the question, Councillor Coombe. And I note the comments you made in the meeting the other day, consistent with the question that you asked. And I agree that there's potential for this as a template for other situations that are similar. That said, I think every situation would need to be evaluated on its own merits with respect to the property, its condition, the options for dealing with it. But this sort of arrangement, I'm sure, should be considered as an option where circumstances would allow. So I'll be making sure that that is fed back through our community facilities team.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive, and just best wishes to the Pest Free Kaipātiki team taking on this big restoration work. Fantastic to see. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor. The last question I've got is from Councillor Wayne Walker.
Sure. So my question and comment just follows right on from Councillor Coombe. I think that it's a critical requirement for us to change the template, because if things have tracked according to the officer advice, this building would have been demolished at some cost and a huge opportunity lost. In this instance, we have an opportunity to, one, retain a building, but two, to acknowledge the phenomenal work that this particular group is doing that would otherwise be paid for by council. probably saving us hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. So there's a really critical need to alter the circumstance here. And my question that goes to this further is, we had a workshop, I think it was just yesterday, around the consideration of leases for community organisations and rentals. And part of that was around propositions to increase the charges to community groups. I think that this particular example here indicates that a peppercorn rental is entirely appropriate, and in fact we should actually be giving them money, but we're not. So I have a question around how this relates to the process that's underway around consideration of rentals and leases, and obviously the related point around the necessity to change our policy in this area. Thank you.
Yeah, would somebody like to answer that question?
Yes, sorry, Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to respond to that.
The Chief Executive is one of our officers, so please go ahead.
Yes, thanks, Councillor. A little bit in line with my response to Councillor Coombe. I think, it's not possible for me to give a kind of a global response to say that in every circumstance we will find a solution that's just like this. But what I could say is that we will make sure that when we are faced with circumstances such as this, we will look for opportunities that include this kind of option as an outcome. Again, I couldn't give an undertaking that we'll always find one, but I think it's worth reflecting on this model and the extent to which it's successful in these circumstances, and looking to make sure that this option is evaluated when similar circumstances prevail in the future.
Thank you very much for that. So we come now to comments. First comment from Councillor Richard Hills.
And kia ora, and thank you all again, and thanks to the officers for not only this report, but all the work that's gone into this over the last, I think it's about a year. And obviously, thank you so much to the local board, Kaipātiki Local Board, John Gillon and team, for backing PFK, and for Joe Knight and the team. Pest Free Kaipātiki started through the Kaipātiki Restoration Group that I think started in 2009-ish. It was a small group, including Joe Knight, of very keen volunteers. We used to meet in the Northcote War Memorial Hall on cold nights with soup and other things with the Kaipātiki Community Facilities Trust, and it was all about doing as much mahi on the ground as possible, but with small numbers and big vision. In 2015, they pushed hard to create Pest Free Kaipātiki, worked with us when I was on the Kaipātiki Local Board, and have continued to grow and grow and grow. And from that small number of volunteers is now right across Kaipātiki with hundreds of volunteers, halos in almost every community, working in 160 reserves. Is just phenomenal, the amount of work that's done. We do help support them with regional funding. The Kaipātiki Local Board also give them quite a decent amount of funding as well, and they get funding from Birkenhead Licensing Trust and many other ways. But they use that for what they do. It's quite a small amount of funding in the end of the day compared to the amount of work they do. So that those thousands of volunteer hours every year and everything, the value they're putting into our parks and reserves, we couldn't actually do on council funding through our contracts. We just couldn't get that amount of work done. So this will step up another massive amount for our community and support communities around the shore in Auckland as well, and will help continue to bring the birds back, get rid of weeds, get rid of rats and stoats and everything else that we experience across Tamaki Makaurau, and it's just phenomenal work, and it's part of the many groups that have popped up over the last decade or so across Auckland. So it's just fantastic work, and what we have put there in B, it's acknowledging that as a council, and we're seeing it now again with COVID, we just do not have the funding for those extra renewals. We cannot take on these old buildings and continue to have that liability for the region. So Chris and I and the local board are very supportive of Pest Free Kaipātiki taking over this building, but also working as they've done already in innovative ways to get that funding, to get that support, but not rely continually on the ratepayer, because we already know that our current council buildings are in much need of that renewal funding. So I think this is a good deal for the community and a good deal for us, and just want to hope that everyone supports this. But yeah, fantastic work by all, and thank you very much. And I'm sure we will all be there for the first stage of the opening after the team have got it upgraded, and all that volunteer work and continual restoration work will continue along while the site is being used in a much better way. And thank you for the comments about the bowling club. It was very amicable, and it's been done in a very good, positive, constructive way as well. Those members knew that it was time to move to other clubs and have the better use for the space. That wasn't just for 10 to 20 members, as we've seen in many bowling clubs across Auckland that can happen. So I want to thank them as well, and there's a really positive history there that I'm sure Pest Free Kaipātiki will continue to celebrate as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hill. So Councillor Christabi.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Hills has covered most points really, really well, but I do want to acknowledge Pest Free Kaipātiki and Joe Knight helming that organisation. Also John Gillon and the Kaipātiki Local Board for shepherding this through. Working an issue through like this, where you're staring at a massive liability and coming out the other side with just a really good outcome, is fantastic. So hats off to the board and Pest Free Kaipātiki for this, along with our staff also for having the willingness to look towards a really good outcome. So Pest Free Kaipātiki today, they've confirmed that they're not here, with coming cap in hand. They've got great commercial relationships already in place, and it's just so refreshing to see that. And John Gillon and I witnessed that at a recent planting where Pest Free Kaipātiki were leading the day, and Naylor Love, a big construction company here on the North Shore, operating right throughout New Zealand, were manning the barbies and contributing, and as were other companies as well. So good outcome here, and I would say the birds of Birkenhead, Birkdale, Northcote, Glenfield, etc. will be singing praise of this one. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor John Watson.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor, and I'll be quick, but I think what's transpired here this morning is of sufficiently positive significance to merit a few comments, and I'm happy to do that. In the first instance, in respect of Pest Free Kaipātiki, whose influence goes way beyond just the confines of Kaipatiki or the North Shore. They go over to the Albany ward as well, so they do a huge amount of work. And when I saw that visual of the people crammed into the little room there, then what clearly more space is going to make a very significant difference for the ability of their work to expand beyond what they're even doing now in that immediate area that we saw. As far as building on community assets, and I regard the old Glenfield Bowling Club as a community asset, what is particularly pleasing from my point of view is the manner now in which it's reinventing itself. So it served what was, a new suburb, Glenfield in the 1960s, one of the first new suburbs on the North Shore of the Nappy Valley, I think they used to call it. Now it's finding its way as a use for an environmental centre for the considerably, not just the local community, but particularly the schools, the young people that live in the area, which it is very well positioned for. So this is an excellent location in terms of centrality, not just for Glenfield, but for those other surrounding suburbs. So it's very easily accessible. In this respect, I'm very impressed by the leadership of the Kaipatiki Local Board here, who have saw an opportunity, have been reasonably adamant in terms of their own view of how this space could be best used going forward, and credit to the officers that they obviously have seen that possibility and have been willing to advance that. The net result of this is quite distinct from other instances where I know in my own ward where buildings have been destroyed, just the bulldozers put over them, and they've been left vacant for years and years. In this instance, we have a group that's doing a lot of work, which has secured what appears on the face of it to be some pretty substantial investment, and probably will proceed at a pace that's in excess of what is normally the case in terms of building and planning and all the the due diligence that gets done. So I just think, and Councillor Walker made this point, as a blueprint for the future, this is an excellent example. It's uplifting. It provides not just for the immediate future, but for the long-term future. So we're now 2020. The community's had the best part of 70 years use of this facility for a recreational pursuit. Going forward, who knows what length of time we're going to have now for any number of environmental benefits. And if ever there's a time for considering the environment, it's now. So I genuinely take my hat off to all those people concerned, in particular Pest Free Kaipātiki and the Kaipātiki Local Board. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, and just some brief words from me. I think this is the right solution from a community point of view, and the value that the Pest Free Kaipātiki Restoration Society clearly is adding to its community and its ability to build those coalitions with the private sector and with council. So I congratulate them on the work that they've done. I congratulate the local board on seeing the opportunity that exists there. I do note the qualification by our chief executive and agree with that it won't be a case of this being the solution every time. Sometimes when we have community facilities that are derelict, the answer will be to demolish them and to sell the property. But in this case, there was an exceptionally strong argument that the best way forward financially and the best way forward from the community's perspective was to do what these recommendations actually achieve. I think that we'll get great value out of the buildings through their use by Pest Free Kaipātiki, and it means that effectively the council has been saved $150,000 in demolition costs for a piece of land that I think is very suitable for the purpose for which it will now be put. So once again, to Jo, if she's still on the line, I think she will be, congratulations to you and all of your members. If you can pass on our thanks as a council for the great work that you do on behalf of the community over on the shore in Kaipātiki. And it's now time to put the recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 To the contrary, no.
Aye.
I declare that carried, and I think unanimously.